Here we are, Serreire. Just wanted to perhaps give you a little example why we have some of the rules we have. We do have quite a lot of rules that are designed at making sure the fish can get off a rig if it's been if a fish has snapped you off in the snags and pads and so on Serreire. That's why we have the no leaders rule and the barbless hook rule, and you must release the leads rule and so on. And this is a good example of why. We have lots of lily pads on Serreire, and they look beautiful in the summer, and you see carp swimming around them and in them, and they're lovely. But underneath that lovely stuff you see on the surface is an absolute mass of this stuff. Now this is actually quite a small one. Some of them are thicker than your arm, the ones right near to the bottom. Now if you had to design the perfect snag, if you were a carp and you wanted to design a snag that you could get yourself, hooked up on and stop somebody landing you, you'd probably design these lily pads. They're absolutely outrageous as a snag, really. Underneath the water is meters and meters of this stuff, and it's not straight. It runs along the bottom, loops up, splits. You've got lots of V's in it as well, which is perfect for a lead to get stuck in. If a fish gets into these, you will lose it. I'm absolutely guaranteeing you. But in the process of losing it, you're likely to rip its mouth. We do see that on here. And our rules are not designed to be difficult for you for fishing or make your life difficult. They're designed to protect the fish for things like this. Yeah, the snag fishing is one of the biggest problems we see here for people that are not used to it, losing fish, and often losing fish, leaving tackle, rigs in the fish. There's a few very simple things you can do, which will mean you'll probably never lose another fish in this kind of snag fishing. There are other lakes with much more severe snags, which there's always a chance. But here, in all the time I've been here, I've had about 200 fish out of Serreire now. I haven't lost a fish, I haven't left tackle in a fish in a snag yet, and there's no need to do it if you just follow a few basic rules. Now, it all starts with your mindset and your state of mind of thinking through the snag fishing. It's different to normal fishing. First of all, you've got to think to yourself, it's better. Some people want to play or are happy to play the numbers game, where they'll say, well, if I hook enough of them, one of them I'm going to get in, it will swim towards me or something. And that's true, they will. If you hook 10 fish, you might get 1 or 2 in. But you've got to think about the 8 fish you've lost. And people will also say things like, oh, it's okay, I got the rig back. They've gone out in a boat and they've got the rig back. But the problem with that is when they've got the rig back, it means by default, really, the rig's been ripped out of the fish's mouth. The hook has ripped, or the fish has ripped itself off the hook. So yeah, they've got the rig back, but the fish has probably got some mouth damage, almost definitely going to have some mouth damage. Now, if that happens week after week after week, so many times, you're going to end up with a lot of fish with mouth damage. So this is why we take it really seriously. So really the first thing it comes down to is accepting that it's better to have, let's say, 1 take with 1 fish on the bank than it is with 10 takes and no fish, or perhaps 10 takes and 1 or 2 fish. It's better to have less takes but a really high chance of landing them. That's what it's all about. It's very tempting to go closer and closer and closer and into snags and into pads, and you'll get takes quick, but you will lose them. And we say it every Saturday, and it happens every single week. It's frustrating for us, and to be honest, it's frustrating for the angler. Nobody's winning in that situation. So first thing, state of mind. Accept it's better to have less takes, accept you're going to wait a bit longer, but when you do get a take, you're going to land it. Okay, the next thing is, before you're even starting to think about snag fishing, you've got to have the right gear. First of all, the line has got to be very strong and very abrasion resistant. Now, I'm not so interested in the breaking strain of the line. To me, with snag fishing, it's the diameter. I have seen people trying to snag fish with things like 0.28 mil, which would be, I don't know, about 11 pound or 10 pound or something breaking strain line. It's never going to work. You're fishing for 50, 60, 70 pound fish on this complex. They're so powerful, they will snap that line, I guarantee it. The line I use for snag fishing is 0.4 or even 0.43 millimetre in diameter. Very, very strong. It's like tow rope. And the key is abrasion resistance more than the breaking strain. The test curve of most rods, you're not going to even break, let's say, a 15 pound line. You're not going to break the line with the rod. But what you will find is if a thin line touches a branch or something reasonably abrasive underwater, it just cuts straight away. It's the abrasion resistance that's important more than the breaking strain. So thick line is a must. New line, we've had people arrive here with 3 or 4 year old line on the spools. It snaps, you can snap it with your hands. It's crazy. You know, you need new line and you need thick line. Then you need a strong hook. I personally, I know a lot of people use bigger hooks. I still use a size 6 hook, but I make sure it's a strong hook. The rest of the rig doesn't matter too much. They are the key things. I say that apart from the lead clip, you must be able to drop the lead instantly if you're snag fishing, but we'll come on to that on a different piece of footage. Okay, so that's the tackle. Obviously goes without saying, the rod needs to be reasonably a strong rod as well. Next is the setup. Now you need to, first of all, you need to point the rod at the spot. You don't want the line coming off the rod at 90 degrees. I see people, they point 3 rods straight out from the swim and they'll have a rod fishing to the snags down to the left or the right where the line's coming off the rod tip at nearly 90 degrees. Now that's a problem because if you haven't got snag ears or something like that, the rod can get pulled off the setup easily. But even the give in the top of the rod, if the rod doesn't get pulled off, is quite a bit, and it's the whole setup is not stable. What you need is a rock solid setup that's not going to move anywhere and point the rod. That's why most people snag fishing use individual bank sticks. Point the rod at the spot, point each rod at each spot. Now I personally always fish with the rod pointing very slightly, not a lot, but just slightly upwards, like the rod you can see here. The reason for that is when you get the line under a lot of tension on a take, it pulls the rod down into the buzzer. If you point the rod downwards and there's a lot of tension, the rod will get lifted up. And I've seen rods lifted out of buzzers where people will point the rods, have the rods pointing downwards rather than upwards. So you want the rod level or upwards, but definitely not downwards. As I say, I prefer single bank sticks. This one here I've got set up, it's rock solid, it's pushed through the platform into the ground underneath by a long way, and it's jammed absolutely tight. Stage stands are good here as well, or bank sticks into normal bank, but put them in a long way and make sure they're solid. The back butt rest of the rod needs to be a gripper type system. There's a lot on the market. I used the solar ones from years ago, but you need to be able to jam the rod into it, and then the rod must be absolutely solid, so it can't be pulled forwards. Okay, it's no good if it's like this because the rod can be lifted upwards like that. It needs to be jammed really solid into there. You can adjust these as well so they grip different diameter butts of rods, but that's really important. The rod needs to be locked down. Okay, the front bank stick isn't so important. The front bank stick's stopping the front bank stick's obviously holding the buzzer, and it needs to be stable enough that you're going to get good bite indication, but it's the back bank stick that's stopping the rod being pulled forward. Whatever bite alarm you're using, you need to put it on the most sensitive setting. If it's a Delkim, it wants to be on the plus setting and pretty well on number 6, or if it's really windy, you might need to turn it down a little bit because you'll get too many false bleeps, but it needs to be very sensitive. Now, when you're actually fishing locked up, a lot of people say, yeah, I'm fishing locked up, but they're not. Locked up is not like this, or some people they'll set it up so it's quite tight like this. That's not locked up. Locked up is where you cannot take, it's physically impossible to take any line off that spool. Okay, so the concept behind fishing locked up is that the fish will take the bait, hook itself, the line will tighten, the fish will try to get into the snags, they nearly always do. If you don't give it an inch of line, its head is forced either left, right or upwards in the water. So it tries to swim away from you and its head's pulled to one side or the other, or sometimes upwards. You'll get an almighty boil on the surface if it's coming upwards, or the fish will just kite left or right on a very, very tight line. Now, if you don't give it any line at all going away, if you don't allow it to take any line going away from you at all, it can't build up any momentum, so it's never going to snap the line. Its head just gets pulled around left or right. It forces the fish to kite. Some people are worried, okay, the line's going to snap. It's never going to snap if you've got strong line. But if you allow it to have, on a semi-tight bait runner or clutch, you allow it to have some line, it gets up speed, and it's when it gets up speed, it's going to either reach the snags or it can snap you in that situation, or it'll rip the hook out. If you just keep that line super tight, give it nothing, it's not going to go anywhere other than left, right or up in the water. It takes a lot of bottle to do it the first few times, but it works really, really well. Okay, the next thing is positioning of the rig. Now, monofilament line or fluorocarbon line especially mono, has quite a bit of stretch in it, between 5 and 10% on most monos. So my rule to myself is I fish at least 10% of the distance out to the snags off them, away from them. So just to give you an example, if you're fishing to snags at 70 yards, I would be a minimum of 7 yards off them. If you're fishing to snags at 40 yards, a minimum of 4 yards off them. That's a minimum. Remember, 4 yards is 1 rod length. Here we're fishing to some snags that are probably, I don't know, 70 yards away, something like that. I'm actually about 1.5 rod lengths off them, and even that, you have to. It's a battle to get the fish out. So I see people fish at 150 yards, you know, 1 foot off the pads or the snags. You're never ever going to get the fish out. You're going to lose it almost every single tape. It's inevitable. So fish, if you're fishing at 90 degrees onto snags, fish at least 10% off them. Now, if you're fishing down snags, parallel to some pads or something, you need to be even a lot further off them. The wood swim on this lake is particularly difficult for that. You can be fishing 100 yards down the pads, and I always say whatever your distance is then down them, you want to be about 50% of that distance off them. So if you're fishing at 50 yards down, you literally, 100 yards down, you want to be about 50 yards off. Sounds like a lot. You're going to get a few less takes, but you're going to land them. The reason when you're fishing down pads like this, to be further off them, is the fish will kite. Even if you're locked up, people will say, but I'm locked up, it won't be a problem. They can't go away from you, but they just turn towards the pads and they'll kite. And even if you gain line on them quickly, they can swim sideways, kiting very quickly. Okay, so if you're fishing 90 degrees towards a snag like we are here, you want to be 10% of your distance off. So 100 yards, you want to be 10 yards off. If you're fishing down pads parallel, if you're fishing at 100 yards, you want to be 50 yards off, so 50% of your distance off. If you follow those principles, if you fish those distances away from the snags and you truly fish locked up, it's impossible for a fish to get in the snags, especially in a situation like here where you're fishing at 90 degrees to them. Now, we get people still with fish in those snags, and they say, oh, it's a powerful fish. But basically, there's only 2 reasons a fish will get in the snag in this situation. You were either too close to it to begin with, or you weren't truly locked up. Okay, so if you've got a fish in the snags, you've got it wrong, and you've really got to put those 2 things right. The last thing to say is if you do get a fish stuck in the snags, and it can especially happen when a fish kites if you're fishing down the pads like the wood swim, do not ever pull for a break. If you pull for a break, you're possibly condemning a fish to be tethered for a while and die. It has happened on this lake. We've had 6 or 7 tethered fish since we've been here. Luckily I've released most of them, but we've lost 1 fish through that, and it's really sad when that happens. So you can go out in a boat. The lake's not deep anywhere. Where you're likely to have snags, you're only in usually 2, 3, 4 foot maximum of water. You can reach down pretty well, and you can always get hold of the lead or the leg clip. If you get over the top of the snags, the fish nearly always comes out anyway. Pulling for a break is an absolute no-no, and to be frank with people, if we see someone do that, we'll ask them to leave. It really is unacceptable, not just here, in my opinion, on any complex where they allow boats. Obviously, if you don't have the luxury of a boat, it could be a different thing. But yeah, hopefully that gives a few pointers to it. And the last thing to say is, if you're not sure, I'm here all the time. Just come and ask me. I know all the swims, I know where the snags are. I can tell you what's safe and what isn't safe. So just come and ask anytime. So regarding bite indication, now we see a lot of people, they will fish sometimes locked up, and they'll fish in a way, if I just tighten this right up now, they'll fish like that with a very tight line and the indicator as far up as it will go, and the bait runner locked down tight or the clutch locked down tight. Now, every single bite alarm on the market needs some movement of the line for it to make a bleep. The exception could be a delkim. If you get a violent enough take in this situation, the delkim will probably make a bleep or 2. But most bite alarms, including delkims, you really want the line to pull through the buzzer. So you want to have the line, everyone says have a tight line. Of course, I understand why. You want to have the line as tight as you can, but you still need to have a little bit of a drop on the indicator, something like we have here, a drop about that much. To maintain that drop on the indicator, you need to have some weights on the indicator. Because these snags aren't that far out, I've only got 1 weight on at the moment. If I was fishing 100 and something yards out to snags, I'd have 2 or 3 weights on here. so I could have the line tighter, but still a drop on the indicator. If you have that small drop on the indicator, it's enough to pull the line through the bite alarm and give you a few bleeps. You'll get a little flurry of bleeps and then it will go quiet. If that happens, that's a bite. You know, you look at the rod tip, it'll be going down, but there won't be any more bleeps. You've got to be on that rod at that point instantly. So again, you know, at night time, if you're sleeping and you only get 3 or 4 bleeps, a fish is on, all hell's let loose out here. You need that to have woken you up and you need to be on the rod. So if you are a heavy sleeper, that's a good reason not to snag fish like this at night. But yeah, set the indicator with a drop. You need a drop enough that it can move the line to set the alarm off. One last point to say about this snag fishing is you really have to be on the rod immediately. If you're locked up, it all hell lets loose really. It's exciting fishing, you know, the rod tip's going down, there's a big boil out there, the line's getting tighter and tighter. It's not a type of fishing to do if you're a heavy sleeper. You should wind that rod in at night or move it sufficiently far off the snags. If you're an angler who likes to zip your bivvy door down, you cannot do snag fishing of this type at night. You need to have the bivvy door open, you need to have the bivvy close to the rod, and you need to be on that rod really quickly. And also, if you drink alcohol, I'm not saying one glass of red wine or something, it's fine with dinner, but if you're going to drink alcohol that it's going to impair slightly, make you more difficult for you to wake up, or your reactions will be slightly slower. If you're going to drink like that, do not snag fish, at least not on our lakes. It's not acceptable. You know, you're putting the fish at risk for the sake of having a couple of drinks. Now, you can have drinks as much as you want at home. You're here in France, you're fishing for really, really big fish. Don't risk the welfare of the fish. And to be honest, you've come all the way down here, you know, you want to catch a really big fish. We want you to catch a really big fish. It's not a time to drink a load of alcohol, so don't do it.